What is this, part 6? I seem to have a weird announcement at the beginning of every episode. This one, I think the audio is going to be either better or worse. Long story short, I thought I would be smart and update the firmware in this via HyperX's whatever software that they have for all their crap, and it bricked my microphone and it bricked every bit of recording software on my computer. I can't even get my headphones to record or my webcam, so we're using my phone today, and audio will be great or it will be terrible. We'll find out. Yeah, in episode 4 I said there was going to be like a format change in terms of how I was recording these, and then in episode 5 I mentioned that I was now catching up to where I am. So this is where the change is going to be for the rest of the series now. About every 2 weeks I'm going to wrap up all the videos I record and talk you through whatever I was doing at the time. Troubles, issues, successes, failures, plans, and all that kind of crap, you know, literally whatever was going on with the project. These aren't so much tutorials as it is just following along my process. But if you get anything out of it, that's always a positive. So, this mostly should cover the first half of April, about 2.5 weeks of work. Let's see. We will start with the neck guard, it looks like. Yeah, so I had originally taken off the old neck guard from the chest, from the template that I made for the chest. Of course, I had to make my own new piece. I did have to bring the point down a little bit more because it wasn't so much a rounded neck guard, it had more of a V shape. So I knew to kind of like round out that little bit of rounded bit in the front, I had to kind of cut it out some to get it to lay a little smoother. Almost kind of eyeballed a little bit, kind of like crossed the path between the two, overlapped the left side, then overlapped the right side, drew a line where they were, and then tried to cut down the middle between the two to get a kind of an even flat split, if that makes any sense. I did the same with the back. The back didn't need it a whole lot, but I did want to kind of bring it down just a little bit. Once I got that to settle, then I went over with the duct tape again and made a duct tape template to more or less trace the bottom of that outline, and that would end up making up the bottom trim of the neck guard. Once I had that all drawn out, I pulled it off and transferred it to paper. 3 sheets of paper, laid it on top, and then just cut out the shape. And then, of course, I only had to transfer that to 2 sheets of paper, or 2 sheets of foam. I don't think I did any fancy cuts for these. I think they were all just straight edges. And of course, I layered down my contact cement, and I knew exactly where it was going on the body because I already had that cut out from the old outline for the old neck guard. So all I had to do was just line it up and press it down. A couple spots I didn't press down as good, so I had to kind of give them a second go. But once I had that on, I threw it back up on the table, and then I used more scrap paper to make a template out for the actual neck guard itself. This was kind of interesting. All I did was just tape a bunch of pieces to the inside of the lip of that trim that I made, just to try and get them up in that angle that I wanted around the neck. I only did half of the chest because obviously it's a symmetrical piece. Left side, right side, it's all that matters. Once I had them all taped together, then I went on with a ruler, tried to figure out how high I wanted it. I can't remember exactly how high I went, but it started shorter in the back and kind of got a little longer in the front. At first I thought it was a little too high. I think by the end it looks pretty good once I have everything on, so I'm going to leave it where it's at for now. But I want to say it's probably 6 inches in the front and maybe like 3 on the side. But don't quote me on it. That's what I think it was. More or less I found whatever felt right and then just evened it, or took it to an even number. Once I had that drawn out, then obviously I transferred it all at foam. The only fancy cut I think I did was the very front. I gave it a V cut, so inward cut on the two. That way when they came together, it came to a point. I also realized that even though I was using 10mm foam, it wasn't going to be thick enough for what I wanted, so I laminated it, I think, with 6mm after that. To be insanely lazy, all I did was I traced out the pieces that I had cut out first onto a sheet of foam and outlined it, and then I just laid down contact cement on that. I didn't even cut them out. That way, what I'd do then, I would just lay on the new pieces, or the old pieces, onto the sheet of foam, just press it all in, and then cut it out afterwards. It'll still need buffed out a little bit, but it's a lot smoother than it would have been if I cut them separately and then applied them. Once I was done, glued everything in. Yeah, I also cut out a small little lip, or maybe I cut the inner one shorter. I can't remember now. I might have cut the outer shorter, which the outer would have been a 6mm, I think. That way it had a little extra grab around that bottom trim. Once it got glued on, put it back in the body for a test fit, and stuck pretty good. So far, I have no plans to change what I have so far with the neck guard. It does need beveled out a little bit between the corners, and then obviously the rivets. I'll probably just use some foam clay or something to kind of get that little bit of a bevel. Yeah, that was the first thing I had done. I was just very eager to get some detailing done. Ooh. That sounds like the cat upstairs. Alright, so after that, I had done some test fitting, and I had noticed this before, but I wanted to wait until I had the actual neck guard on. But the body piece was low, and I needed to raise it up, so more or less I needed to add some extra foam onto my shoulders. So more or less all I did was I took some scrap sheets of foam from my thickest stuff, so it would all been 10mm, and I just layered the entire inner pieces around the shoulders, and cut a piece out, glue it in, try it on, get an idea of how much more space I needed. I'd be like, okay, I need maybe 2 more. So take it back off, put 2 more on, take it, try it on again. Like, I think it needs 1 more. I forget exactly how many layers I went for. I think it was either 4 or 5 layers of 10mm foam, so about 40 to 50mm that I raised that up. What that is in inches, I have no idea. Oh wait, I can get an idea. About 1.5 inches to an inch or 2 inches. If it's 5 or 50mm, that's about 2 inches. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, it's because about 25mm is 1 inch. I work in a factory where I deal with nothing but millimeters. Why do I not know this off the top of my head? So about 2 inches, I raised the whole chest up. And after like the last test fit, it came out great. This worked in my advantage too, because since I raised the chest up, that also meant that I raised the arms up. 2 episodes ago on the arm thing, I said that I was unsure if I was going to be using fake hands with handles inside to hold the weapons, or if I'd be just having regular gloves and then I can handle the weapons however I want. Doing this, raising the chest up, it raised the arms up, so now where the hands would rest normally within these arms match where my hands are. So I can use regular gloves, which means I can properly handle weapons, I can put weapons down. Now that does pose a small problem when it comes to handling the hands, because if you know anything about the Black Templars, especially the Sword Brethren, they chain their weapons to their hands, or they chain their weapons to their wrists. If you saw my little unboxing video, I did make note of this a little bit. So what I plan on doing, because since he has 2 weapons, this gun doesn't stay in his hand. I don't know if I really should go into detail because I'm not really zooming in on this. So the sword itself here, the chain is just a loop, and it just runs through the handle, and then the for the bolter, it's attached to the base of it. So my idea, this here, It's going to be held on with either Velcro or magnets, so I'll be able to put that on. So what I'll do is let's use real props for... Okay, so this was the way, right now this is my thought process. What I'll do is have the pins around my wrist, and then I'll take the base of that, clip it on here. Okay, now that's attached. And then the other hand will just be on a loop. So I can just run the loop through the handle. The sword won't have a guard on it, of course, so the loop will then just go across the top here, and it's already wrapped around my hand. I'm good to go. And if I need to put anything down, put the sword down, undo the loop, chains hanging free off my wrist, unhook this, put the gun down, chains are just dangling from my wrists, I'm fine. Still a little tedious, but it's better than nothing. Granted, cosplay is always tedious. There's no getting around that. So, that was an easy fix. That was maybe like an hour or two's worth of work. Cat's going crazy. It seems like it would have been easy, and it is easy, but... Sailor, are you going crazy? But the most time-consuming part was putting it on, taking it off, because I didn't want to just put the chest on and be like, oh, is this good or not? I wanted to put the chest, the arms, but most importantly, the midsection. I was able to also kind of gauge that because I don't have it marked or anything. But can we bring up? No, we can't bring up the toys for this one. I'll throw up a reference image here. But you'll see that for like the regular Space Marines or whatever, part of this open section here is seen. So probably about this much. I wanted that to be seen, even though it's never going to be seen. I'm picky. Also, if you hear a bunch of rattling around me, this little twerp is running around like crazy today. Why are you so hyper? Huh? Why are you so hyper? Now she's not hyper. She's a void. She just blends right in with me because I only wear black too. We're both goths, aren't we? Meow. Okay. Don't get up on the table. I set myself up for this one. Go run around. Okay. On to the next piece. Oh jeez. Yeah, so, remember that whole episode about the arms and the shoulders? This is like arms and shoulders part 2. So we started off with doing the actual shielding. So that was not a giant issue. Just layered a bunch of paper around, then kind of measure out about how high I wanted it. I want to say it was 3 inches. No, the hair above 2, like 2 1/4. Trace out the trim and then trace that out the foam. This would make out the outer sections of both the inner and outer, since it is a little bit of a thick boy, which meant I had to make 8 pieces, front and back, inner and outer, left and right. So 4, 8. I can't count. No fancy bevels or anything like that, just all straight cuts. I probably could have done some angled cuts just to make it hold a little tighter, but nah. Of course, once I had that all figured out, I decided, like, well, do I just laminate a bunch of pieces together and make it super sturdy? I opted against that just because that would get things more kind of wavy. So I made sure that I marked it evenly so that the inner and outer pieces would be completely straight. And then I took that measurement of that gap in between and made strips for the top as well. That way both the bottom gap and the top gap would be exactly the same. That kind of helped hold it a little straighter. It did turn into a ton of pieces that needed glued. It wasn't hard to do, just tedious, like a lot of these things. Yeah, I think while I was in the middle of that, I also took a piece of duct tape, just this old stuff here, and started working on the inner layer trim, because so let's look here. If you can see the between the trim and the actual shielding on the pauldron, there's a giant lip of a bevel to it. It's hard to see with the giant rivets, but it swoops up. And I did the same thing on my Terminator Chaplain's pauldron too. I need enough space for that whole bevel, so I figured the width of this seemed to be about the right length. To save myself on foam clay to do that bevel, because that's what I'll be using for the bevel, I'll probably use like a triangular dowel and run it the whole way along the inside of that. That way the foam clay has less to... Yeah. Okay, well, we'll show you what I mean. So, you have this giant gap here. You know, it's basically a giant L. If I get a triangular dowel, it's going to fill in right out to this line that you're seeing here. It'll probably fill up there to maybe like an inch up here, and then the rest could just be foam clay. That'll just round it all off. Whether or not that's going to be perfect or enough, it's hard to say. These still need a lot of work, and it's driving me nuts. Furnace is running in the background, so we're going to have to make do. But once I had the center strips cut out, just came time again, glue them all together. They weren't super hard to put back together, considering everything was so like tight that there was some worry that it might like snag something as I'm trying to run it through. Since I was dealing with the inner and outer, I just made sure I just spread them apart, did one side, and came back, and definitely could have caught some. I think I might have caught a little, but nothing hit hard enough to really get the stick, so that was pretty good. No major problems there. It's not super clean looking. I'll try later to probably Dremel what I can that's sticking up, and if that doesn't work, I'll fill it with foam clay to smooth it all out. Foam clay shouldn't be used as gap filler, but it can be a good smoother, if that makes any sense. I did that in a ton of spots on my Terminator Chaplain, both in the pauldrons, like in major curves, and where I had to layer some stuff. So the actual like part around the neck, like that giant chest piece, like the round chest piece, there's this huge thick, like 4-inch wide gap that just goes right around in front. I more or less smoothed that all out with foam clay, just because it was so much to Dremel. You would never get that smooth, but foam clay, oh yeah, just layer it on just real nice and thick, get it wet, just flatten it out. Works like a charm. So once I got the outer shield done, I took off that piece of tape I had, made a template for the inner trim of the shield, glued that on. I could have made everything in single pieces, but I chose to do it all in halves. But I think I might have been running out of space on sheets of foam, and cutting them up into smaller pieces just made it easier on me. Let's see, after that, I was running into an issue where the pauldron was a little bit too wide. I mentioned in the video when I talked about this guy that you can see the pauldrons don't go past the visor. Mine go out towards the end of the chest, so I was like, well, I'm going to try and remedy that by duct taping the shield or the pauldron together, and I put it on my table here and measured out what I wanted. That way they could both be consistent between the two. And then I hot glued the crap out of the inside. My hope was that this was going to help kind of hold it together a little bit, and it did not work. I mean, it might have a little bit. They are a little closer consistently. Cat's running around upstairs. But if I want to bring them in, that means I have to cut them and trim them, and I don't want to, because I already have everything inside of the pauldron now, which means I would have to modify all the internal pieces. which would mean modifying or removing the internal shoulder mounting for how high I have it resting on the shoulder plate, and that would be a headache. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to handle that, but as for now, I'm trying not to think about it. That's a back burner thing if I'm able to do any more adjustments before detailing. Otherwise, I'm going to have to live with it. From there, then, came time to do some more arm adjustments. Yes, more arm adjustments. I mentioned in I think it was the last video I did, where I had put the guide plates out on the upper legs because they were kind of bow legging in, and I need something to hold them out. Holy crap, cat! I needed something to hold the legs out from bowing, so I put in these pieces of foam that would stop them from going inward. They would hit my legs first, so the legs would hold straight just by hitting my legs. I had to do the same for the upper arms. They were... Hi, cat. You done being hyper yet? They were hitting, like, they were way too narrow. I needed them to stick out a little bit to get them away from my body. So on the outer parts of the arms, I put a piece of foam, and that made sure it held the entire upper arm. This is her time of day where she's hyper. And it would hold the upper arms away from my arm. And then, in essence, away from the chest piece, which is already big enough as it is. So I don't have to hold my arms out so far. I can just hold my arms regular, and the arms will be farther away, which is exactly what I want. It also helps too, because it since the shoulders are held on that as well, it'll hold the shoulders out straight as well. So the shoulders or the pauldrons are never going to be sloping outward. They will constantly, at a regular rest, will stand in a straight up position. Yeah. I also had to cut the arms down again. This time, I think it was just the forearms. Let me double check here. Yeah, so last time I did the arms, I was happy with how big the upper arms were, but the gauntlets were just a hair too big. They were fine at the wrist, but not at the elbow. So I had to take that and shrink them down some. So I just did a V-cut in the front and back, glued them together. I can't remember how much I took off. I think nothing on the bottom, and I think a 1/2 inch on the top, both front and back. Because my goal was to get them to be the same exact thickness at the elbow as the upper arms as the lower arms. So everything right there at the elbow was the same thickness. That 1/2 inch in front and back did exactly what I needed. After that came the hip plates. I had already done the mounting for them before when I was doing all my fitment, or at least for the sides, because they were originally going to be the mounting points for the legs, but they were great spots for the hip plates. So what I did was I took a random scrap sheet of Hobby Lobby foam, like 4 or 5 millimeter stuff, just taped it to my side, put my stuff on, referenced the images of the figures, and then just kind of like drew out how high and low I wanted it and how wide I wanted it, just to get an idea of the size and scale that I wanted this plate to be. Once I had that all figured out, threw it on the table and started drawing out my shape. At this point it wasn't very symmetrical yet, but I wasn't too worried about that. I could always take my pieces and flip them and then trace them again and get it that way. But I do know that I didn't want it to be flat. I wanted it to have a little bit of a bevel and a curve, because I'd show you the figure, but everything's covering that up. But so they usually start out kind of curved, warp in, and then come back out, almost kind of hourglass-like, probably to kind of like match the shape of the hips, then give you clearance for the legs. I took a couple of tries. I more or less just made a small hourglass piece in the middle and then attached everything. I kept testing it out with tape, painter's tape, just to try and check the shape. And then I try everything on, put it up against my side, see how it looked. The first time, it was a little too much. So I had to kind of like I had to cut it down a little bit. But once I had that, I was pretty happy with it. To make sure that centerpiece that I had made was symmetrical for both the front and back, I made sure that when I traced it, I kind of flipped it upside down and traced it again. That way I knew that whatever imperfections there were in it, it would be on both sides, and it'd be the same. And after that, I glued them all together. While I was test fitting everything, I did the same process again with the sheet of foam, but this time for the back plate, or the butt plate. Nothing super fancy to say about that. Once I got the general shape and size, I followed the reference images to get an idea of like what everything needed to look like. It was a double plate thing with a large plate in the top and a smaller plate in the bottom. Cut out the little notch piece thingy in it that you see in the art, the original piece. I still need to put that little notch in a couple other pieces too, like the shin pieces and stuff like that. Yeah, once I had them glued all together, I had to figure out where the mounting points were going to be for the back as well. So I kind of measured out the center, measured out how wide it was, and kind of like found like a center in between the two. And then once I found that out, I think it took like maybe, how far is that? Probably about an inch up from the base, which is I think is what the side is too. I made sure it was the same. And then ran a loop through with some nylon strips, and I just hot glued the crap out of it from the inside. Had just enough of the loop sticking out, that way I can run my elastic strap through it. Once I had all my pieces made now, I had to glue the elastic strip. You can buy this elastic stuff pretty much anywhere. Walmart sells them in the sewing section, but they advertise them as like stuff for books to like hold books together, or like you can wrap around the book and then just loop in the end with the Velcro piece on the end. You can run it through the loop, pull it back through, and I don't know why it says books, I don't know, but you can use it for anything. This is exactly what I used on here. I didn't need the loop on the end, all I needed was the elastic Velcro piece with the reverse Velcro piece on the end. That way I can run it through the loop and the belt, back onto itself. I took a couple test fittings to figure out exactly how high I wanted that to actually be compared to the loop on the belt on the waist. But I'll show you what I mean here. So, show and tell time. So here, for example, is one. I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit here. We'll get back to why this looks a little different. So anyway, this is all it is. It's just a piece of elastic with like this much of the end here is your reverse end of the Velcro. I just more or less just hot glued it on, then I made sure I reinforced both ends here, that way this is never going to come off. And about this much is still the fuzzy elastic. Now that's fine, because once I glue this through, this much here is going to be on the loop, and that's just going to sit naturally at the top up here. And that's going to give this all the room it needs to wiggle. It's going to be able to bounce however I'm moving, and that's great. Now, the other issue I had, from the inside you can see where the like the actual glue lines are, but you don't see it here. So after I tried everything on, the curve was still too extreme, and I didn't like it. So to remedy that, I had one of two options. One, rebuild it all again. I didn't want to do that because I was already running out of foam. Two, it was a little too thin. I needed to thicken it up anyway. So what I did was I took, again, just like with the visor, I took 6mm foam and just made a giant sheet and pressed this down flat with it. Now it still has some of its curve, but the flat sheet is kind of like pulling back at it and kind of like settling out that curve. So there's some tension going on here, but enough to kind of hold this more flat, but still with a little bit of the curve that it had before. It works. It's not perfect, but it gets the job done for sure, which is exactly what I did here. I cut out a couple sheets of foam, but just a hair bigger than what I needed. Glued the crap out of both surfaces, and then just pushed it down, spread it out. Could have been better ways to do it, but I don't care. Compromises. And once they dried, I just glued them all out. And I gave them one more test fit to make sure everything was fitting pretty good. And I'm fairly happy with them. In this clip though, In this clip though, I didn't have the back piece on because I had ran out of elastic straps. And I had to go to Walmart to buy more because I thought I bought more, but apparently I didn't. I had to go buy more. And then this brings us to our last piece of the week. I started working on the backpack. This is one of the few pieces I have not made yet. So, starting it all from scratch, made a cardboard template. Same thing as all the other times. Made a bunch of 1x1 squares on a piece of cardboard, and then I had my reference images from before for scaling, and traced all that out inside the squares to try and get each square as accurate as I could on screen versus, yeah. So to make sure I had it as accurate as I wanted, because there is a silhouette here that I do like, that I did not want to mess up, and that is, I'll probably have to use a thumbnail or something. It's kind of how the backpack almost wraps around from shoulder to shoulder. It's like a perfect round oval. Like it almost kind of like accentuates the neck and shoulder muscles to make them look even bigger, and I love that. So I had to make sure I got that right. So what I did was I took the whole chest piece. Once I had a basic idea of it sketched out to make sure it was right, I then put it right behind it to see if it did fit that whole shape. And it did, which is exactly what I wanted. I was not able to get good image references for this, so I had the height and the width of what I needed. And that was all that mattered, because when I started that, I also had this guy. So I was able to fill in all those gaps with this. From there it became just a usual cardboard template where I made both my vertical and horizontal pieces. I figured before I did any of the actual pieces, though, to get the geometry, I would start drawing out the actual details of everything first on the cardboard piece, because this is going to be a little complicated. So I can't show too much here because of bad lighting and all that. But so you got the giant circle here in the center, but this entire top piece is going to like wrap around it. So I needed to kind of like build that as well. Same with all the other kind of little details. So I tried drawing all that out first. That way, once I had everything kind of made, I can kind of take that off and use it as reference and all that other junk too. So yeah, build up the bottom, build up the sides, started squaring it all out to try and get a shape. These are always time consuming and fun to make. It was an all-night process to make this. Definitely went overboard with all my cardboard, but I wanted it to be sturdy, so when I went to go wrap it all up and plastic wrap and duct tape, that nothing was going to be warped too much. Ran out of cardboard and ended up using some cardstock paper, which is pretty tough, or tough enough. I only needed enough to hold the shape, so I ran a couple pieces of cardboard inside just for reinforcement to hold everything still, and then just ran that so I had a flat surface for it all. Reinforced it with a bunch of duct tape too, just to be safe. And then once I had that general shape done, I had to make the whole beveled part. So this required a ton of work. Somewhere in the template process, I found out that, let's see, I actually have it somewhere here. So I still have the circle I made for what would be the circular pieces that are on the side. The whole rounded part is the same exact size as the circle in the back, or at least I made it that way. So I more or less made a template tracing all that out, and then just made a bunch of circles to kind of fit that and work its whole way down the end. And then I filled those gaps in to kind of hold everything straight and steady. So when I go to wrap everything up, nothing's going to sink in. I only bought one cardboard box to make all this out of. So I was running out of a lot of cardboard as I was building this, and I think I have more cardboard in the back, just scrap, so I was panicking when I shouldn't have. And once I got the bevel going the whole way across, then I had to kind of get the corners to round off as well. Same thing, I just took the same exact circular shape, but just angled them out, and then took them down that side. Because if you look at the backpack, it's the part that's straight up and down is flush with the actual square part of the backpack, and then the very corners of it angle at about a 45-ish to the side. So I just took the same rounded template I made and just flipped it 45 and just ran it along the ends. That took a lot of work to get figured out, but once that was done, I didn't want to run any risks of, when I run that plastic wrap and tape over, it does tend to kind of want to sink in to those gaps when you're making your duct tape template. So I took a bunch of cardstock and just wrapped it all around that, cut it to shape, taped it in, and did that several times over just to make sure that was as sturdy as possible all the way around. I used pretty much a whole roll of duct tape building this whole thing. But I made sure too, when I went to do the angled bit on the corners, that was its own separate sheet of cardstock. That way that there was a distinct difference between the top and then the corner sides. That, and afterwards when I went to make my duct tape template, I could find that corner too. I could just feel for it and see it. I wouldn't have to try and measure anything out. I just knew exactly where it was. You could just tell by seeing. Once I got that all figured out, then I had to make both the front and back openings on this as well, because it doesn't run flush with the circle on the back. It actually has a giant cutout for it and a lip and all that. This is where I goofed. So, because I had the picture drawn on the back for how I wanted the front, I ended up putting the back of the top on the front and the front of the top on the back. This is fine because I can flip this around afterwards in the template process, because if you look, I have a straight line drawn across that entire top. So that's going to be super easy. It's the same size and shape, top and bottom, so that entire top can just get flipped around. I just have to remember to do that when I build it. So what I will do is when I go to build it, I'm going to build the top and bottom separate and just set them aside, and then just make sure, 100% sure that I know that I have them set right when I go to connect them. But yeah, so then after I did that, I had to do the little lip on the end too, because it doesn't come completely round down to the back square end. There's a lip, and then it goes around. So I had to build that too. Lots of little things I kind of forgot, but you catch them before you make before you start making your duct tape template. I did the same exact thing for the back. I kind of measured out how high that needed to be, and this is going to be one of those details that's never gets seen, but it's a small little back detail that's going to be right behind the neck guard. So not only is my neck guard going to cover it, but so is the helmet, and it's going to be buried back there behind me. But for anyone who looks close enough, they'll see it and they'll be like, oh, that's a neat detail to put in there. This one was actually a little more complicated because the shape of this cutout in the back, there's a recessed cylinder inside the outer cylinder. So there's a giant cylinder, then a cutout shape with an internal cylinder. So I had to get both of them down and figured out. It was a pain. Got it though. This, like I said, this template took all night to make. Once I had all that done, I kind of started drawing out all my lines. This wasn't super necessary, but I wanted to make sure everything was kind of measured proper. Anyway, after that came plastic wrap. This was a little tricky, especially in the two cutout spots. Of course, it wants to lay over it rather than into it. So I had to constantly do a couple layers, cut that, press it in, and all these parts were missing because I had cut it. And so I'm constantly cutting pieces, shoving it in there, cutting pieces, shoving it in there. It was a pain. It was a total pain. I mean, not like aggravating, but it was just, it took time. And then after that, I just started layering everything up with duct tape. Trying to make sure I hit the corners proper. That way nothing kind of like rolls up or doesn't fill properly. I needed to fill those corners as tight as I can. And then once I had all the duct tape down, I took a marker, traced out all the edges that I needed, just to make sure everything was all nice and distinct. Then started doing all of my alignment marks, hash marks, and all that fun stuff. Surprisingly came out pretty good. Yeah, I made sure I tried to measure out where that line was because, actually, let's pull out the actual thing. Because, especially here in the front, if you see, even though this end here, spot here ends, the internal cylinder is obviously up higher because it's internal. So that means that this corner here is going to be higher. So I had to measure out to make sure that this was flush with this and that this line then continued evenly the whole way around. That way when I do go to build this, then this entire top half gets spun around. Because the only thing that really makes a difference is that this is the outer side, this bevel here, and then the inner side is all flat. But this part here is supposed to go up against my back, which means that's the inside. So this side is supposed to be the inside, this is supposed to be the outside, outside, inside. I'm an idiot. I mean, it worked out in my favor though, because I needed that image that I drew to draw out the contour for this to get the exact circular shape, so that the circle piece here would fit perfect within this. So, as dumb as I feel for it, it served its purpose. On top of that, I also made sure I made sure I put in plenty of if you can see them, registration marks. That way when I cut all these pieces out, I'll know exactly where they go, where they connect. Made sure I labeled them as well. So yeah, at front 1, front 2, front 3. And here I have out 0, out 1, out 2, out 3. And then but then yeah, you can see here on the back, yeah, I have all these individual pieces numbered. So back 0, back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I have made sure I had these labeled as front, and I had this labeled as back. Let's see, as far as angle cuts go, so this one will probably be a straight, and then I'll probably have the inside of this one here be a 45 just to get this 45-ish angle, or 90, I don't know, you know what I mean. Same thing here, this will probably be straight, and that'll probably be an angle cut, and same with these two will both be an angle cut, since that's a 90 degree, that's a 45 degree angle, one's flat, one's angled, 90 degree angle, both are angled when you're doing your cuts. Alright, but that brings us up to now, where I will be going after this. Insane. I'll be going insane. After a couple more test fits, I feel like the legs and the shins and the feet might still be a little too wide. Whether I do it or not, or just live with it, is going to be something I'm going to determine here in the next 2 days. We'll find out. Aside from that, a lot more detailing, little things like that. But detailing is finally happening. I want to say I'm at like almost like just a hair less than 2 months to go on this build, so I need to really start ramping up into the detailing phase so I can get into the sewing phase, the painting phase, and then go to the con. What's coming up next? This is currently at a standstill because I am out of thick foam again. I have not been to Michael's, but I bought out everything they have last time, and I'm pretty sure that they don't have anything in stock yet. If they're anything like any of the craft stores I get anything else from, I'll buy them out and it takes like a month for them to get anything in. It's like they never do inventory. It's a small town, what are you doing? Do inventory. I mean, we're in the modern age, this stuff's digital. It's like, oh, this person bought everything. We're out of stock. Buy more. Side rant. This is one of the reasons I hate Hobby Lobby so much. So, our Hobby Lobby used to have an entire aisle of EVA sheet foam, like 6mm and 2mm, 5mm, 2mm. Every time it came to convention time, because at the time that was the only place I could get it. I didn't know anywhere online I could buy it, and it was the only place I could buy any of my stuff. So we're talking like my Tyrael suit and back. So Tyrael, Imperious, Demon Hunters, both of them, all my props. But anyway, that first like 3-4 years of cosplaying, Hobby Lobby was where I went for all my stuff. So every time convention season went around, you would think at that time they would realize, oh, the entire winter in these last 4 years, we sell out all of our foam. Not just a little, all of it. And I mean, like, there was a row like of just non-stop foam. I'd go in there and I'd be like, hey, you have any foam in the back? They'd be like, no, someone keeps buying it all. That was me. I was buying it all. Get more. I ended up buying it off of them online because they never had it in stock. So the remedy to this, instead of buying more or something like that, they decreased their stock. Store managers make no sense to me whatsoever. You sell something a lot, stock it. You want to make money. What are you doing? Hey, Hobby Lobby. Thankfully, now we have so many places online we can buy foam. My Joann's store started doing the same exact thing. I bought all their foam. They decided to stop selling it entirely. They seem to sell it still on their website, but I don't know. Right now, Michael's is my newest victim. I've been buying out all of their foam, so I haven't checked yet. I'm just expecting the usual. I could be surprised, I don't know. But, okay, rant over. This is it for now. Up next, like I said, backpack still on hold till I get new foam in. I just made an order. In the meantime, I think I'm going to start working on the helmet next, and then probably get to work on the weapons and hands. In the meantime, in between all that, I'm probably going to do some more fitment things here and there, get the pauldrons where I want them, because right now they're still bowed out, and I need them to come in just a little bit more, and I got to figure out how to do that without pulling my hair out. I still think the legs and shins are a little too thick. I also kind of want to raise myself up a little higher, which means raising the platforms in the show. That, I mean, not much, like 2 inches. That's all I want, is maybe 2 inches. That's all of that is on the table. As far as fitment goes, I'm on a very seesaw horse of, do I do it and fix it, or do I live with it and move forward? If I have time, I will fix it. If I don't, I will live with it. Time is starting to get really short in terms of that, and I gotta stop dilly-dallying and just live with what I have, because otherwise it's not going to get done. Plus, I'm insanely picky, so it's never going to look right to me. There's always going to be something wrong. I mean, they always say that, you know, you are your worst critic. When you're building stuff or painting anything, that's always the case. So, see you in the next one. I don't know when that will be, and I don't even know when this one will come out. So,